From 1939 to 1941, the German plan to invade Iceland, Operation Ikarus. In Greek mythology, high-flying Icarus was too ambitious and came crashing down into the Aegean. Operation Ikarus came unstuck over colder waters. Operation Only Too Thinkable, as far as the Germans were concerned, Operation Fork had gone ahead on the 10th of May. Within a week, the British had taken over Iceland. The move was frankly preemptive. Germany had occupied Denmark and Norway in April, and the island nation would have been a logical next step. Iceland was officially neutral, but since nobody expected the Germans to respect this status, the British saw no reason why they should respect it either. They'd moved even more swiftly to take the Faroe Islands, a Danish possession just a stone's throw away from the Shetlands. Not just part of Britain, but a vital naval base. A daunting prospect. Ironically, the evidence suggests that the idea of invading Iceland hadn't crossed Hitler's mind. Inevitably, however, it did now. Operation Ikarus was the result. Troops of the 163rd Infantry Division were to embark on the converted liners Bremen and Europa at the Norwegian port of Tromsø, backed by a panzer battalion and an armoured reconnaissance company with some mobile artillery. They would land on the northern coast outside Akureyri, and in the east near Reykjavik. But the British by now had settled in and were formidably well established on the island. The few hundred Marines who had mounted the original invasion had been replaced by regular army troops, 4,000, with more arriving all the time. Counting the cost. Operation Versabung had been a triumph for the Germans, as bold and swashbuckling as it had been ruthlessly effective. But this victory for Blitzkrieg had still come at quite a heavy cost, particularly to the Navy. The heavy cruiser Blücher had been lost, the Scharnhorst and the Gneisenau badly damaged. The cruiser Admiral Hipper was suffering chronic engine problems. The light cruiser Königsberg had been shot up by coastal batteries, as had the artillery training ship Brems. And so the list went on. Nothing was more certain than that further losses and damage would be inflicted by the Royal Navy as the Icarus invasion force made its fateful voyage. Deep waters. It wasn't really this that daunted the Germans, though. Indeed, the officers of the intended invasion force weren't really daunted at all. It was their intended escorts who were blenching at the prospect. Air Force chiefs shook their heads at the thought of sending bomber crews out so far across the stormy vastness of the North Atlantic. Naval high-ups were, if anything, less convinced. Simply getting the expedition to Iceland was going to take a 4-day voyage across seas that were at best unpredictable, and at worst atrocious. And this would be true not just for the initial invasion, but for every time an attempt was made to resupply any occupying force on the island, or indeed to come to its defense should the Allies decide to try to take the island back. Whatever the other calls on its men and ships in a war that seemed to be deepening by the week, a hard-pressed Kriegsmarine would have to run the gauntlet of the Royal Navy. By June, the idea had been dropped.